My son-in-law was standing on my dock, telling me my own boat wasn't mine anymore, and my granddaughter was 3 states away in a hospital bed fighting a fever that wouldn't break. It was almost midnight on a Tuesday when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I'm Walter, and I just turned 58 that spring, though most days my knees insisted I was closer to 80. I'd spent that whole day replacing a transom on a client's pontoon boat, hunched over in a way that made my lower back file a formal complaint. But sleep wasn't happening. Not with my daughter's texts still lighting up my screen every hour, each one a little more frightened than the last. Emma is my only daughter. Her little girl, Grace, was 3 years old, and she'd been admitted to the Children's Hospital in Louisville 2 days earlier with a kidney infection that had turned into something the doctors were watching very closely. Emma had sent a photo of Grace asleep with an IV taped to the back of her tiny hand, and I'd stared at that picture for a long time before I could put the phone down. That's when the family group chat lit up. My wife Carol had left it years ago, tired of the noise, but I still checked it out of habit. My brother-in-law Dale had started it back when we bought the lake house together with my late brother-in-law's insurance money, calling it Loon Lake Crew, and it mostly filled up with fish photos and complaints about the neighbor's dog. This time it read different. Reunion weekend moved up. Everybody's coming Thursday through the following Sunday. 10 of us plus the grandkids. Have the boat gassed up and the dock cleared. I read it twice. Nobody had asked if the house was even open that week. Nobody had asked how Grace was doing, even though Emma had posted in that same thread the night before that her daughter was in the hospital and things were tense. My son-in-law, Peter, married into the family only 2 years, but treated by everyone like he'd been born into it, replied before I even had the chance. Perfect timing. We could use the break. Grace will be fine. Kids get sick all the time. I felt something in my chest go tight and cold at the same time. Carol read it over my shoulder in bed, and I felt her go still beside me. Tell me he did not just say that, she said quietly. She typed back herself, because I think some part of her still believed reasoning with these people ever worked. Our granddaughter is in the hospital. Please, not this week. The answer came fast, and it wasn't from Peter. It was from my brother-in-law, Dale. Nothing's changing. Everyone already took off work. Dale is 61, drives a truck he can't actually afford the payments on, and has never once in his life let somebody else's medical emergency interrupt a weekend he'd already mentally reserved a cooler for. My sister-in-law, Brenda, added a line right underneath about how they'd bring their own food and wouldn't be any trouble at all, like the trouble was ever the groceries and not the 10 adults, 6 kids, and 2 boats that showed up every single time. I sat there running the math of every summer for the last 15 years. The time they arrived 2 days early and let themselves in with the code I'd given them for emergencies only. The time Dale backed his boat into my dock and never once mentioned paying for the repair. The time Brenda left a shopping list taped to my refrigerator with my name at the top like I worked there. Peter, in just 2 years, had already picked up the family habit of calling the lake house our place, like he'd ever once shown up with a toolbox instead of a cooler. Carol didn't push me toward anything. She just looked at her phone where Emma had sent another photo. Grace hooked up to a monitor now and said the only thing that mattered: I am not opening that house to 10 people while our granddaughter is in a hospital bed 3 hours from here. I understood exactly what would happen if I let this slide the way I always had. Carol would stay glued to her phone worrying over Emma and Grace while I drove up to the lake to play host, gas up the boat, stock the fridge, and smooth over whatever needed smoothing. Nobody had ever voted on that arrangement out loud, but it had been mine to carry for over a decade. I typed one word back: fine. Carol looked at me sideways. Fine as in they're coming? I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. Fine as in I'm done arguing with people who won't listen. I picked the phone back up and called Russ, a retired locksmith 2 lots down who'd rekeyed half the lake for me over the years. Favor for favor. It rang twice before he picked up, half asleep. I asked if he could meet me first thing in the morning. The guilt showed up right on schedule, same as it always did. My in-laws were in their 60s and 70s. The reunion had been on the calendar for months. Somebody, somewhere, was going to decide I was the villain of this story before the weekend was even over. Then my phone buzzed again. Emma. Dad, they're saying we're overreacting. Peter's mom just told me Grace probably just has a bug. I read that twice, feeling something in me that had been quiet for a long time finally stand up straight. I went to the closet and packed a bag without letting myself think too hard about it, because thinking hard was how I'd always talked myself back into the old pattern. Carol stood in the doorway watching me fold 2 shirts I didn't even check for wrinkles. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Make sure that house isn't available to anybody who thinks a sick 3-year-old is an inconvenience," I told her. I left our place in Nashville a little before 5 the next morning, before the sky had even started turning gray over the ridge. The drive up to the lake, out past Bowling Green and into the hills of southern Indiana, takes about 4 hours if the interstate cooperates, and I had a long stretch of empty road to sit with what I'd just decided to do. My phone kept buzzing along the drive, but it wasn't anybody asking about Grace. "Get the boat topped off. Somebody needs to mow before Thursday. Brenda's bringing her mother this time, so we need another air mattress." Not one message about my granddaughter. Not a single one. Somewhere past Elizabethtown, I found myself asking a question I didn't much care for the answer to. Was I really doing this to protect Grace? Or had I been waiting years for an excuse to finally stop being everybody's built-in caretaker, and Grace's fever had just handed me one? I turned that over most of the rest of the drive and never landed on a clean answer. Probably it was both. That felt more honest than pretending this was only about my granddaughter. The lake house has a history that has nothing to do with Dale's side of the family, though you'd never know it from the way they all talked about it. It was Carol's father's place first, built back in the 60s, and it was falling in on itself by the time he passed and left it to Carol and me outright. We put 15 years of vacations into that house instead of relaxing in it. New dock, rebuilt boathouse, a kitchen we finally redid 3 summers back. Dale's family never put a dime into any of it. Dale once told me word for word, "Why would I sink money into somebody else's vacation house?" And yet he was always the first one through the door once the work was finished. Russ met me out at the property around 10 that morning. He'd known this family for 20 years, watched 3 generations of them tramp in and out every summer, so I could tell my request caught him a little off guard. "New code on the boathouse and the front door both," I told him. "Kill every old code completely. I want the dock gate rekeyed too, and check that the trail camera by the shed still works." He raised an eyebrow but didn't push back. "Family trouble?" "Family boundary," I said. It wasn't clever. It wasn't rehearsed. It was just true. While he worked, I went through the house myself, cleared out anything that would spoil in the fridge. Packed a small bag of things Grace loved having there. Her little life jacket, a stuffed rabbit she always left behind, the beach towel with her name stitched on it that Carol had made her. I brought the deck chairs into the boathouse since rain was coming in off the lake, closed the blinds, set the thermostat low. I didn't shut off the water or the power. I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I just wasn't going to open that door. Before I left, I taped one sheet of paper to the inside of the front window, facing out where anybody pulling into the drive would see it first thing. "House closed this week. Family emergency." My phone rang as I was locking the boathouse. "Dale." I almost let it ride to voicemail. I answered anyway. He didn't ask about Grace either. "Did you fill the propane tanks?" I told him the house wasn't going to be open this week. There was a pause long enough I could hear a ball game playing somewhere behind him. "You don't get to pull this stunt and embarrass everybody," he said. The old reflex kicked in, the one that wanted to apologize before I'd even finished hearing him out. Then I looked over at the little life jacket sitting on the passenger seat of my truck, the one with Grace's name written in Sharpie on the collar. "This isn't about anybody's feelings getting hurt, Dale," I said. "My granddaughter is sick in a hospital bed. Families adjust when a kid is sick." "That's exactly what I'm doing," I told him, and hung up before he could get another word in. My hand was shaking a little afterward, which surprised me some. 58 years old, and a phone call from my own brother-in-law could still rattle me like that. On the drive back down toward Louisville to be with Emma and Grace, Brenda sent the group chat a full sleeping arrangement for all 10 adults and 6 kids, like nothing I'd said had registered at all. Dale and his wife got the master bedroom, the one with the lake view and the good mattress, the one I'd always used when we visited before Carol's father passed. I read that sitting in a gas station parking lot off I-65, and instead of the guilt I expected, I felt something a lot closer to clear-headed calm. I opened the lock app on my phone and started deleting guest codes one at a time, until the list showed only my name and Carol's. A little notification popped up. "All guest access removed." For the first time since that message hit the family chat 2 nights before, the quiet coming off that house didn't feel like something I owed anybody an apology for. By Thursday afternoon, I was sitting in a hospital chair in Louisville next to Carol, watching Grace sleep with a monitor clipped to her toe. Her fever had come down half a degree overnight, which the nurse told us was good news. The first good news we'd had in 3 days. Emma sat on the other side of the bed, running her thumb along Grace's small hand. At 2:40 that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the trail camera by the shed. I opened it without thinking twice, and there they were. 2 trucks and an SUV pulling into the gravel drive. Dale in his truck first, Brenda and her mother right behind him. Then a cousin's SUV towing a trailer stacked with coolers and pool noodles. 10 adults and 6 kids climbed out over the next few minutes. Suitcases, grocery bags, 2 inflatable tubes, still half inflated, 1 very confused golden retriever. I watched the whole thing unfold on a 6-inch screen, sitting in a hospital chair 3 hours away. At first they thought the keypad had just glitched. I could see Dale punching in the old code again and again, shaking his head. Brenda had her phone out already. Peter walked the length of the dock checking a side gate that had never existed in the first place. The call started almost immediately. I let the first 2 go to voicemail. Brenda's voice, more confused than angry. "Walter, the code isn't working. Call me back." Then Peter, sharper. "Real funny, Walter. Send the new code." Then Dale, the one that actually got under my skin a little. "Your sister-in-law is standing out here in the heat. Fix this right now." I sat there feeling the old pull to just make it stop, to send the code and smooth it over one more time the way I always had. These were my in-laws. Some of them were pushing 70. I didn't want anybody stuck out there with no plan. So I sent 1 text to the whole chat and nothing more. "The house is closed. There's a Hampton Inn and a Holiday Inn Express, both 15 minutes up the road with rooms open." I told Dale yesterday this week wasn't happening. That's when Sam walked over. Sam's our neighbor 2 lots down from the lake house. An old army guy who keeps to himself and doesn't get pulled into family business as a rule. But with 2 trucks and an SUV blocking half the shared drive, I guess he figured somebody needed to say something. Dale asked him if he had a spare key. "Nope," Sam said. "Walter took the guest codes out yesterday. Brenda told him this was the family reunion house. Always had been." Sam just shrugged, calm as anything. "Belongs to Walter and Carol. Her daddy built it." I heard the rest of it later secondhand, but apparently that one plain sentence landed harder on Dale than anything I'd said on the phone the day before. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a fact nobody in that family much liked saying out loud. Sam Adderley. "Walter said the place was closed on account of his granddaughter being sick in the hospital. Figured y'all already knew that." Nobody standing in that driveway wanted to admit they had. Somewhere in the middle of all that, the golden retriever knocked over a cooler and sent ice sliding across the gravel. A bag of hot dog buns split open. And in the middle of the mess, one of the kids, I think it was Brenda's grandson, asked loud enough for the trail camera's little speaker to catch it clean. "Uncle Dale, I thought Papaw Walter said this was everybody's house?" Dale didn't have an answer for that one either. Back at the hospital, Emma asked if I wanted to call anybody back. Part of me did, I'll admit that. She didn't push me either direction. She just reminded me gently that Grace had finally gone down for a real stretch of sleep after 2 rough nights. A few minutes later, my phone rang again, Dale a second time, and the ringtone startled Grace awake. She started crying, this small, worn-out cry that undid something in my chest faster than any voicemail from Dale ever could. I put the phone on silent. That night, Peter posted something on Facebook. My father-in-law locked his own family, including small children, out of the lake house after everybody drove hours to get there. Some people never change. No mention of Grace's kidney infection. No mention that Carol had asked them to wait. No mention that the house was in Carol's name, or that I'd told Dale the day before, or that I'd sent 2 hotel names the second they pulled in. Within the hour, cousins I hadn't heard from in years were messaging me. An aunt I actually respect called and asked, "Couldn't you have found another way to handle this?" I started to wonder for a minute if she had a point. That night, Grace woke up crying hard enough that Emma sat her upright to help her catch her breath. My phone kept lighting up on the little hospital side table with messages I didn't read. Grace pressed her face into her mother's shoulder and said the only thing that mattered. "No more loud phones, Mommy." I reached over and turned mine off completely. The locks, I was starting to understand, had been the easy part. Friday morning, Grace's numbers still weren't moving the direction the doctors wanted, so they kept her another night for observation. While Emma filled out paperwork at the nurse's station, I sat in a hallway chair scrolling through my phone and found Peter's post had already made its way into the bigger family group, the one with second cousins and great aunts I mostly only saw at funerals. Somebody had called me heartless. Somebody else had used the word selfish. I sat there in that hallway seriously considering just reopening the house the following week to make the noise stop. Carol came and sat beside me. Must have read it right off my face, because instead of arguing with me about it, she reached into her bag and pulled out an old accordion folder I hadn't seen in years. I didn't even know she'd kept it. Inside were receipts, old bank statements, copies of checks, screenshots of texts asking for help, notes she'd kept mostly for our own taxes over the years, tracking every dollar we'd ever sent Dale's side of the family. "You keep remembering what they needed," she said, laying it open across her lap. I kept remembering what it cost us. We went through it together right there in that hospital hallway, waiting on Grace's next set of labs. The total came to just over $198,000 across almost 18 years. Cash, materials, direct expenses, and that wasn't counting the hundreds of unpaid hours I'd spent up on that roof or under that dock. 3 memories stood out as we worked through the pages. Back in 2011, Dale had come up $28,000 short trying to keep his auto shop open after a partner walked out on him. My own mother, before she passed, told me plainly, "You're doing fine. Your brother-in-law has a family to feed." Carol and I pulled it out of the account we'd been building toward our own retirement. Dale promised he'd pay it back within a year. He never did. A few months later, he bought a new truck. In 2018, Carol and I had finally planned our first real vacation in years. Just the two of us, down to the Gulf Coast. 3 days before we were set to leave, Dale's roof started leaking bad. He didn't want to pay a contractor. "Walter knows how to do it," he told everybody. I canceled our trip, spent 5 days up on that roof, and paid for the shingles myself. Carol spent what should have been our anniversary week alone in an empty house. When I finally apologized for it afterward, all she said was, "I know you think they need you." And then there was the lake house itself, slowly turning into something that wasn't really ours anymore, even though the deed only ever had our 2 names on it. The first summer after Carol's father passed, Brenda started inviting relatives without asking either of us. Nobody objected. I sure didn't, and it just became the pattern after that. Dale brought fishing buddies for whole weekends. Brenda kept her own linens in our closet like she paid rent there. Dale started calling the master bedroom our room. Carol had quietly become a guest in her own father's house. Sitting there with that folder open across both our laps, I understood the money wasn't really what stung the worst. What stung was realizing I'd spent years buying peace with Dale's side of the family using Carol's patience, Emma's childhood memories at that lake, and money that should have gone toward our own small family's future. I kept telling myself I was holding everybody together, I said out loud. Carol didn't look away from me. "You were," she said. "You just forgot Emma and I were part of everybody too." It wasn't said to hurt me. It was just true, and it landed the way true things always do. When the doctors finally cleared Grace to go home 2 days later with a course of antibiotics and a follow-up scheduled, I carried her out to Emma's car myself. She was too worn out to do much more than blink at me while I buckled her into her car seat, her breathing steadier now, but her little body still heavy with sleep. I thought about 10 people trying to walk into that house with a dog barking and coolers banging against the porch rail, while a 3-year-old struggled just to keep her fever down in a hospital 3 hours away, and whatever doubt I still had about the locks disappeared for good. That evening, once Grace was settled back at Emma's place, I sent one more message to the family chat. "We're having one family meeting 3 weeks from this Saturday at the lake house. I'll say my piece once. After that, the new rules stand." Dale replied almost right away. "Good. You owe everybody an apology, especially your sister-in-law." I looked over at that folder still sitting open on our kitchen table. He still thought I was inviting everybody up there to surrender. 3 weeks later, Grace was nearly back to herself, chasing Emma's cat around the porch and asking for a snack every 20 minutes, like a kid who'd never spent a night in a hospital bed in her life. Watching her run circles around that porch made everything I still had to get through that Saturday a little easier to carry. The meeting happened on the deck of the lake house that afternoon. Carol kept the food simple: burgers off the grill, a bowl of coleslaw, a pitcher of sweet tea sweating on the railing. Nobody showed up expecting a cookout. They showed up expecting an apology and an open house again. Dale still hadn't taken his post down. My mother-in-law's brother, Frank, sat down at the picnic table first, arms crossed. "Before anybody eats, Dale deserves to hear you say you're sorry. I didn't argue with him. I walked around the table and set a small stack of papers down in front of each adult. The top line on the first page read, "What we've paid, what we've provided, and what changes starting today." I told them plainly I wasn't asking a single person to pay a dime of it back. I just wanted it said once, out loud, with real numbers attached. $28,000 for Dale's shop, $9,000 in emergency payments the year his hours got cut. After that, $14,000 in medical costs for my own mother over the years. $22,000 in materials for repairs on Dale and Brenda's house. Close to $40,000 in groceries, dock repairs, and cleaning tied to the lake house alone. On top of all that, smaller loans that never came back around. $198,000, give or take, over almost 18 years. Dale said I was turning family into a business deal. No, I said. A business would have sent invoices. I never sent a single one. He pushed harder, said the whole family had used that house for years, so locking everybody out was a cruel way to make a point. That's when Carol spoke up for the first time all afternoon. Using something for years doesn't make it yours. She set a printed text message down in front of him, one Brenda had sent the summer before. "Tell Carol to clear her sewing stuff out of the back closet before we get there." "Why exactly?" she asked Dale. "Was I supposed to clear my own belongings out of a house my father built with his own two hands?" He didn't have an answer for that either. I told him I wanted the Facebook post taken down, or at the very least corrected. He said it reflected how he honestly felt in the moment. He knew exactly what was sitting in that thread. Carol's message about Grace's kidney infection. Dale's own reply that nothing was changing. Frank, sitting a few chairs down, looked at him and said, "You left that whole part out, didn't you?" Dale muttered something about Facebook not being the place for every little detail. "Guess it was the place for every detail that made Walter look bad, though," Frank said. Dale tried a different angle. "After everything this family's done for you, this is how you treat us." I didn't deny they'd been family to me for over 30 years. "I've loved being part of this family," I said. "But that doesn't hand anybody a lifetime claim on my wife's house, our savings, or our time." Brenda's voice cracked a little. "We were only trying to keep everybody together the way we always have." Carol answered that one calm as anything. "You tried to bring 10 adults and 6 kids into that house, while our 3-year-old granddaughter was hooked up to monitors in a hospital bed. That wasn't keeping anybody together. That was telling us we didn't matter as much as a weekend on the water." Brenda started crying, and something in me wanted to take it all back right then. Tell her I was sorry, pour her some sweet tea, let the whole thing dissolve the way arguments in this family always used to. But then I thought about Grace flinching at a ringing phone, whispering, "No more loud phones, Mommy," and I stayed right where I was. I laid out the new terms, plain and simple. Nobody uses the lake house without both Carol and me inviting them first. No more people showing up on their own schedule to a property that isn't theirs. No more informal loans handed out with nothing in writing. I'd still help with real emergencies, but I was done funding Dale's lifestyle choices. And anybody who used Grace's health as leverage again would lose the right to come up here at all. Dale asked if I was choosing Carol's side over the family I'd married into. I looked through the sliding door at Emma's face, at Carol standing with her arms crossed by the grill, at the little life jacket still hanging on a hook by the back door from 3 weeks earlier. "No," I told him. "I'm choosing the family I'm actually responsible for." Then I asked one last question. "Can you name one single time in 18 years that anybody asked Carol before inviting people up to her father's house?" He didn't answer. I looked at Brenda. Nothing. Even Peter, who'd started this whole thing with a Facebook post, came up empty. Nobody yelled. Nobody needed to. The quiet said everything I'd spent 3 weeks trying to find the words for. "That's why the locks changed," I said. Dale deleted the post right there at the table. Not because he'd changed his mind about any of it, but because he didn't want that group chat screenshot sitting underneath it for everybody to see. Before he left, Frank told me I'd torn this family apart with my own hands. "No, Frank," I said. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken." Dale didn't speak to me for almost 4 months after that Saturday afternoon on our own deck. That part still stings more than I expected it to. He'd leaned on me for the better part of 2 decades, sure, but he was still family, and there were nights I lay awake wondering if I could have drawn that same line without drawing quite so much blood along with it. What I noticed, though, was how much lighter the rest of our life got once the bleeding finally stopped. Money that used to disappear into somebody else's emergency started staying in our own account. Carol and I actually took a real trip that fall, down to see Emma and Grace for a whole week with nothing else on the calendar. No dock waiting to be rebuilt. No last-minute grocery list taped to a fridge that wasn't even ours to stock in the first place. My knees still aren't what they used to be, and my back still files its complaints most evenings. But at least I'm not spending my weekends fixing somebody else's roof for free anymore. My relationship with Dale's side of the family didn't heal up clean, and I've stopped expecting it to. Dale never once apologized, not to this day. Brenda sends stiff little texts around the holidays that read more like obligation than anything warm. I didn't cut them off completely. I still call to check in, still ask how everybody's doing, but I stopped being the automatic answer to every problem that ever showed up in their lives. When Dale's truck finally gave out on him that winter, I handed him the number of a good mechanic instead of driving up with my own tools. About 5 months after that Saturday on the deck, my phone rang, and it was Brenda. I braced myself the way I always used to before answering her calls. She didn't announce anything. "Would it be all right?" she said, hesitating in a way I don't think I'd ever once heard from her. "If Dale and I came by for the afternoon this Sunday?" It wasn't an apology, and I want to be honest about that. It wasn't some clean moment where everything got resolved in a single phone call. But it was the first time in longer than I could remember that she'd actually asked. I looked over at Carol folding laundry on the couch, and she gave me a small nod. "Sunday afternoon works," I told Brenda. "Come by after 2. Small. Almost nothing at all, if you didn't know our history. But it was real. The following spring, the three of us, Carol, Emma, and Grace, drove up to the lake house together for the first time since that Thursday the year before. Grace was 4 now, steady on her feet, and she took off straight down to the water with a bright orange bucket like she owned the whole shoreline, which in a way that finally meant something, she did. Carol sat on the porch with her coffee, watching Grace dig a hole way too big for that little shovel of hers. I walked up to the front door before we went inside and checked the lock out of habit more than anything else. It didn't feel like a weapon in my hand anymore. It was just a lock, the same as any house has, the plain, ordinary right to decide who gets to walk through your own front door. I've thought a good deal about what the real payoff was in all of this. It wasn't the number in that folder. It wasn't the picture of 10 adults standing confused in a gravel driveway. It was something quieter than either of those things. It was making sure my granddaughter never grows up believing that love means letting people ignore what you need most. Carol came up beside me while Grace kept digging. "Any regrets, old man?" she asked, the way she always used to tease me back when we were young. I watched our granddaughter fling sand in every direction, laughing at nothing at all. "Only that I waited this long to draw the line," I told her. "If you've ever had to set a boundary with your own family, you already know it never comes easy, and it hardly ever comes clean. But sometimes the people who love you most are standing right in front of you the whole time, just waiting for you to finally see them." Love isn't measured by how many times you say yes. It's measured by knowing who's still standing beside you when you finally say no. A locked door isn't the end of a family. It's just the beginning of an honest one. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for the people who truly love you is stop being available to the ones who never noticed you at all. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its life lessons still landed somewhere warm in your heart.